Hey everyone, Happy New Year. Let's talk resolutions. The awkward thing in talking about this is if any of you guys have picked up the semblance of a schedule on this channel and the robust, well-established schedule on my main channel, you'll know that last year didn't go that great. Which is to say, last year we stumbled across the finish line, leaving many videos that should have gone up on my various channels before the new year wholly ungotten up. My broad account of last year is that since buying this house in the summer, I've been treading water in terms of productivity, with my head frequently slipping under. And that's because there was a lot of DIY stuff that needed doing, and therefore getting ahead of schedule with the videos wasn't a priority. So when some of the DIY stuff ended up taking longer than expected, I ended up falling behind schedule with my uploads. But the harrowing reality is actually I was already struggling with my workload at the beginning of last year, way before all these new house obligations. I just got away with it by sacrificing other important stuff. The best example of this is that I planned to take the entirety of the Easter weekend as a sabbatical, just doing absolutely no work at all for that whole 3-day period. And yes, I ended up staying on schedule that April, technically, because I decided to work right the way through Easter. I also kept on schedule from January through to March, but that's because for the first 3 months of this year, I was working on this massive project that ended up still taking much less time than I thought it would, so I had a whole load of time in hand for those months. The concern is that if I've just been constantly behind schedule for every single month of last year, the reality is I must just be scheduling way too much work for me to do. And that's a problem because I don't feel like I'm achieving that much, and I actually want to be achieving much more in a typical month. And guess what? It's January 5th as I'm writing this, and I'm already behind schedule again because I somehow managed to underestimate how much the very first task I set myself for this year would actually take me. The only cause for optimism is that in this month I'm also trying to catch up on the stuff I should have done at the end of last year. So hopefully, if I'm able to eventually get back on schedule this month, going into the next month, I'll only have to worry about the stuff I have to do for that month rather than playing any catch up. What I need to work out is how long it actually takes me to get done in 1 month what I plan to get done for that month, and then I can work out my actual capabilities. The phrase I've been using to describe my situation recently is procrastination burnout, essentially a situation where I'm never really relaxing, but I'm never really working either. I don't get enough work done during the day, which means when it's time to relax, I'm not really able to because I'm stressed about being behind on my work. But then, because I didn't have the opportunity to relax and recharge, when it actually comes time to do my work the next day, I feel burnt out, I feel stressed, so I end up just giving up and procrastinating. And that then puts me further behind on my work, and so on. The key here is to understand that first step. I don't get enough done during the day, and that's where my resolutions come in. I don't have too many New Year's resolutions for this year because I've decided to go for quality over quantity. I want some solid resolutions that fit what a goal should actually be rather than wishy-washy ones. But to be fair, what I'm considering just one resolution is actually multiple resolutions of varying levels of strictness. The first is to never ever go on Reddit. Ever. Reddit is a very easy place to waste a lot of time because you find a subreddit you've never found before or you haven't been on for a while, and you can just scroll through posts for ages. So that has to stop categorically. I do think it's important to anticipate possible exceptions in advance so that if I do encounter those situations where I might have an exception, I can actually have prepared for them in advance rather than coming up with ad hoc justifications that would undermine the sincerity of the goal in the first place. With that said, I do have a subreddit for my channel created by someone else, so maybe I should put aside some time to occasionally look at that just to foster some audience engagement. The thing is though, my account is permanently banned from commenting on Reddit anyway, so I wouldn't be able to engage with anyone. I would just be checking out the subreddit and looking at it, which wouldn't really be achieving that much. Maybe, though, I will at some point allow myself to check out my own subreddit and just look at it, but to be honest, there's not really any risk of me wasting lots of time there because it's not very active in the first place. The next rule was going to be just don't go on Twitter. Just as strict as for Reddit, just don't spend any time on there because that's definitely another place where I can waste a lot of time. But again, there is the fact that I post on the internet to make money. So arguably it is actually part of my work to spend at least some time on social media to increase my reach. I'm not sure about that though, because ever since they introduced the Twitter Blue pay to play feature, I find that as someone who refuses to pay for Twitter, I don't really get that many interactions on my tweets nowadays. It's possible there are some people who find out about my YouTube channel through Twitter, which is ultimately the only benefit Twitter could have for me, but I think even then that's pretty minimal. Another benefit of Twitter used to be that I'd see lots of trans versus gender critical tweets, and that would sometimes give me ideas for videos. So again, that was useful, but ever since the mass blue sky exodus, I don't see conversations like that anything like as much. So the minor exception I've carved out here with regards to Twitter is that for 10 minutes, 3 times a day, I will go through my YouTube comments and reply to them. This has been part of my schedule forever because interacting with the comments on YouTube is not only very good in terms of increasing engagement and as such pays dividends, but also it can be quite fulfilling. Thing is, few days after an upload, I start to get fewer and fewer comments, and certainly not enough that it takes 30 minutes a day to engage with them. So what I'm going to say is that if it's one of those 10-minute periods and I don't have any comments to respond to on YouTube, then in that situation, I will allow myself to browse Twitter just for the sake of the engagement. The final goal is to do with YouTube itself, because watching YouTube videos can waste a lot of time. Thank you though to those who have decided to waste their time watching this one. So in some sense, my goal again is to never watch any videos ever for any reason whatsoever. In reality, it's just to commit to something I've already been doing, but make it much more universal. See, I'm a big believer in the watch later option on YouTube, that thing that just creates a massive backlog of videos to get through. And that's because I do a lot of things where I could easily just be listening to a YouTube video, and sometimes I've actually found myself bored because I don't have anything to listen to while I'm doing some menial manual task. So my rule is that I can go onto YouTube and I can look at the recommended videos, but I'm not allowed to watch any of them. I can just add them to my watch later so that when I'm doing something like making thumbnails or cooking or some aspects of the editing process or lots of other things, or I can just listen to something, that's when I work my way through those videos. Now, you might notice this is me talking about listening to YouTube videos, and there are, although in my experience it's a minority, of videos that require you to actually be watching them in order to get anything like a worthwhile experience. So the rule for those is that I will only watch them when I am flossing my teeth or brushing them, and that allows me to keep up with my dental hygiene, because while I'm watching a video I can commit to doing it for the full amount of time you're supposed to, while I can also watch my favorite creators. And like I say, there aren't that many YouTube videos in my experience that really require you to actually be watching them. Anyway, so those are all my rules about social media, and I think they're a pretty great mix of strict but also achievable. But speaking of strict, one problem I've always had is my sleeping schedule, especially getting up in the morning. What I generally find is that waking up sets me up for the entire day. If I have the motivation and the self-discipline to get up with my alarm, that kind of energy and that desire to achieve something will stay with me for the entire day. Just a little bit of snoozing, just a few minutes lying in, and that energy stays with me for the rest of the day. And everything I do it with less urgency or not at all. I know a lot of people also struggle with forcing themselves to go to bed at the right time, but I find that if I force myself to get up early, then by the time it's time to go to bed, going to bed at that time is actually very welcome. Not to say I don't struggle to get to sleep, it actually takes me quite a while, but getting up at a consistent time massively helps. Anyway, my actual rule is always get out of bed before I turn off my alarm. That's it. Very simple. Just before I hit that dismiss button, I need to be stood up, out of bed. Significantly, I can actually get back in bed afterwards, but not to sleep. If I have some sort of work to do that means that I can do that work in bed and I want to lie in, that's fine. So obviously we're already a few days into January, and I have been consistent with this rule, but I've also enjoyed that working in bed privilege in an interesting way. See, I also have a religion channel, and a huge part of my work for that is research, and a big part of that is listening to Bible commentaries so I can hear how other people are interpreting things. I count that as my work, but it's a nice break because even though it's work, it's just something I'm listening to, so I can actually listen to it while I'm playing games, or indeed lying in bed. So that's what I let myself do Sunday morning. I got up, I still felt tired, but I just put my headphones on and listened to a Bible commentary while I was lying in bed. The thing is, I did then fall asleep. As I was lying there in bed listening to Bible commentary, I drifted off. But honestly, I don't mind that. Because I struggle to fall asleep ordinarily, I actually savor the moments where I fall asleep without even trying. It reminds me of when I was cramming for my final exam at university, and that meant forcing myself to get up and start being disciplined with my schedule, having been very lax about that for the entire year up until that point. Thing is, I was so tired that I actually ended up falling asleep in the pages of the book as I was reading it. Just 1 minute I was reading, next minute I was waking up face down in the book. I think I just enjoy the knowledge of knowing how much I must have needed that sleep, and then I got it. And there's something really satisfying about that. I have heard it said that if you wake up feeling like you really desperately want to go back to sleep, that means you're not getting enough sleep. In my experience, that's nonsense, because I always wake up feeling like I desperately need more sleep, but I never get tired very much before it's my normal time to go to bed anyway. By contrast, on the occasions where I have slept in until I didn't feel like I needed to sleep at all, I've ended up going to bed hours later than my ordinary bedtime. So clearly I was getting way more sleep than I needed. It does annoy me that I struggle to get to sleep and then I struggle to get up. I get up at 6:40, dragging myself out of bed when it would be absolute heaven on earth if I could just go back to sleep. And then I go to bed at 10:30 in the evening and I lie there for at least half an hour feeling no need to go to sleep whatsoever. Some people talk about insomnia. I feel I have what I would call insomniacia. It's not that I struggle to get to sleep, but more that I struggle to change my state from awake to sleepy and vice versa. When I wake up in the morning so ready to go to sleep, I just think, why can't I feel like this at bedtime? Why can't I feel like this when I'm on a long-haul overnight flight? Still, I guess I should count my blessings, because some people struggle to get to sleep even if they've woken up prematurely, and that must be awful. It's annoying enough having to try to go to sleep just once in the night, so imagine if when I then woke up in the middle of the night, I had to struggle just as much to get to sleep again. I have had that experience when I've been really anxious about something, and I can confirm it absolutely sucks. And one final, I guess, strict resolution, which, like I say, strict resolutions are the only ones that really matter in my view, is to always finish scheduling the next month before I finish the current month. So if you know anything about me, you'll know that I'm incredibly reliant on having a schedule in order to get anything done. I'm not entirely sure what it is about me that makes me so reliant on a schedule such that I forget. That's actually quite a strange thing to have. The simplest version is having an immediate knowledge of what I need to do makes it much easier for me to be productive. With that said, it's important that I take some time to plan out the plan, because if you don't plan out the plan, you don't have a plan. Problem is, there were way too many months last year where I felt like I was treading water because I didn't finish planning out what I was supposed to do until it was already that month. And then I'd be spending so much time trying to keep up with what I was supposed to be doing that I wouldn't get around to planning out what I was supposed to be doing next, and then everything just totally fell apart. So my goal is to make it so by the time it gets to next month, I've already planned out everything I'm going to be doing in February. Indeed, I've already scheduled out some time for me to draw up that plan. This all might sound like I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, so I'll say now another one of my goals, albeit a much more nebulous one, is to take way more seriously my downtime, taking it just as seriously as working. One thing I really want to do is start taking Sabbath rest seriously, because I have been way too bad at that my entire life. And what I want to do is get to a point where I am being productive throughout the week, but I am taking a whole day entirely dedicated to relaxing and recharging. I also have some goals for this year, but I say goals rather than resolutions because these are things that aren't entirely in my control. Like, for example, I have several channels and my goal is to get them all monetized, which means hitting the thresholds for achieving that. A more ambitious goal would be to set specific amounts of money I want to be earning from each channel, such that I can be earning a decent living wage and living a good life, but I can't be bothered to work that out. And like I say, It's sort of beyond my control. Obviously, there's things I can do like working hard, regularly uploading, all that sort of stuff, but I can't just directly decide how many views I'm going to get. I suppose another goal I sort of have is that I want to write a book, but considering I've just been speaking about how I'm already struggling with what I'm doing and my goal is to actually decrease my workload so I can have more time to relax, it's very unlikely I'm going to find time to write a book, so that's not realistic. I also have the goal of going to the gym and exercising. Thing there is it's more of a mental barrier than a physical one because I get very anxious when I work out, when I do some sort of physical exertion, and therefore what I really need to make sure is that I have the mental side already dealt with before I start trying to work on the physical. Anyway, I think I've said enough about this for now, so let me know what your New Year's resolutions are in the comments below. By the way, one of my New Year's resolutions also is to get a video up on this channel every single Monday from now on. Obviously, like I say, I finished last year a bit behind. I'm starting this year as such necessarily a little bit behind, but from now on, I want to be back on schedule, uploads every Monday. So look forward to that. And yeah, like I say, let me know what your resolutions are in the comments below.